Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you've been playing hardcore leveling warrior, you know just how tough it can get, especially when you're tackling the harder levels. But don't worry, the game's got your back with 24 different hero companions to help you out. These companions aren't just there to look cool, they bring some serious power and abilities that can make all the difference in your battles. Whether you're a solo player or need that extra support, there's a companion for every need. In today's video, we're going to break down all these companions in a handy tier list. We'll talk about their strengths, weaknesses, and how they fit into your strategy. Some of these companions are absolute game changers, while others might leave you wishing for something better. Stick around as we dive into the best and the not so great companions in hardcore leveling warrior. Trust me, you're going to want to know which ones deserve a spot in your team. I'm quickly moving on to the video and I'm ranking companions in hardcore leveling warrior. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The companions in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Daikon, Kyo, Lazy, Foodie Sora, Rim, Boy Dark, Scallion Head, and Octanash. Alright, let's dive into something a little less exciting for now. If you're just starting out in Haikyuu Legends, you'll quickly realize that some companions really need to be swapped out as soon as you can. I'm talking about those companions that, while cute and full of potential, just don't quite have the stats to back up their abilities. Yep, I'm talking about the D tier companions. First up, we have Daikon. He's got a nice little burn effect that can deal a solid chunk of damage. But here's the kicker, he only deals critical damage if the enemies were already burned. So, while he has some potential, you're gonna need a bit of setup to make him work. And that can be tricky when his other stats don't really hold up. Think of Daikon as that one friend who talks a big game but doesn't always deliver when it's time to back it up. Then we have Kyo. Kyo's got the longest range of all the basic heroes, which is pretty sweet for picking off enemies from afar. His increased damage against frozen enemies is also a nice bonus. But the rest of his abilities? Yikes, he only has a 50% chance to stun, and his attack and HP are just too low to make him reliable in tough battles. Kyo's like that sniper who misses half their shots and barely survives a hit. Not exactly what you want when you're facing down tougher enemies. Lazy might sound promising at first. He increases attack by a solid 150%, and slowing enemies down by 20 points can really help out. But there's a catch. He only deals critical damage if the enemies are in fear, and his attack speed is incredibly slow. So you're going to be stuck waiting for him to wind up those big hits while your enemies are already on the move. If you want to make Lazy work, you'll need a whole lot of patience. Now, let's talk about Foodie Sora. This one might sound nice with her 20 points of defense and her bonus damage against bleeding enemies. But wait, she only recovers 2% HP per attack and only heals her allies for 3 HP. It's like bringing a plate of food to the party, but it's the kind of food that leaves you still hungry. Sora's more about the vibes than actual healing, so don't count on her to keep your team alive during a tough fight. Rim's another one that's not quite living up to expectations. Sure, she can electrocute enemies for some decent damage, but her HP is way too low. She's like the electric shock that gives you a jolt but fades away just when you need more. If you're thinking Rim is going to carry the team, well, think again. She's not quite the powerhouse you'd hope for. Boy Dark? More like Boy, not quite. His ability to summon a blood golem sounds cool, but using 25% of your own HP to do it? Yeah, that's risky business, especially when his chance to restrain enemies is only 70%. You think he'd be more reliable, but instead, it feels like you're taking a gamble every time you summon that golem. He's a bit of a dice roll, you win some, you lose some. Scallion Head is next, and man, does he fall short in a lot of areas. While he can increase pen and deal some decent damage when you recover HP, his attack and HP stats are just too low. He only recovers 1% HP for allies when attacked, so his ability to help the team is pretty minimal. Scallion Head's like the sidekick who's trying, but just doesn't have the chops to keep up with the main crew. Last up, we've got Octanash. He's got great HP regeneration, which sounds nice, and knocking enemies back is always a handy bonus. But here's the deal, he only deals 50% damage to enemies, and his Earth Fangs restore a measly 0.5% HP. That's right, 0.5%. With attack stats that are too low to really stand up to tougher enemies, Octanash is more of a filler character than a game changer. So yeah, these D tier companions are definitely ones you'll want to swap out as soon as possible. They've got some quirky abilities, but in the long run, they just don't cut it. They might be useful for a little while, but when the tougher enemies start showing up, you'll definitely want to bring in some stronger companions to handle the heat. The companions in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Constant, Arms, Nathan Han, and Choco BB. Alright, let's dive into the C tier abilities in Haikyuu Legends, where things can get a little tricky. These abilities might not always shine as brightly as the top tier ones, but they've got their own quirky strengths, and knowing how to make the most of them can still give you an edge in battle. So, let's talk about 4 characters with some unique abilities that might surprise you if you know when to use them. First up, we've got Constant. Now, don't be fooled by the low base HP. Constant is a bit of a glass cannon, but with some wild abilities to back up the lack of defense. His spike attack, which deals decent damage to random enemies, is super interesting, and the fact that it can deal another massive hit after 1 second makes him a solid damage dealer. The stasis effect adds some control to the mix, but there's a catch. You can't move while using his final Fooler ability, which can leave you vulnerable. But hey, if you're into high risk, high reward gameplay, this guy's definitely worth checking out. Then we've got Arms, a bit of a support powerhouse with a twist. When Arms summons the Santa Maria ship, all companions get a 20% HP recovery, which is pretty solid for keeping your team alive in tough fights. The real kicker here is the insane boss damage amplification, 500%. If you're up against a boss, Armors can turn the tide in your favor, but the cost of using the Santa Maria ship is a hefty chunk of your mana, and the ship itself has low HP, so you need to be mindful of how you use it. Keep an eye on your mana, and make sure your team can survive while the Santa Maria works its magic. Next, we've got Nathan Han, a bit of an ice wizard who really knows how to freeze things up. Literally, his HP regeneration is boosted, and his Ice Tornado ability can deal a good amount of damage while freezing enemies in its path. It's a random moving tornado, so you don't have full control over where it goes, but if you can position Nathan Han well, you can get a lot of value from it. The automatic freeze effect when defeating enemies can also be a game changer, especially in large mobs. The downside, it's not the most reliable damage source, and you're kind of at the mercy of the tornado's erratic movement. But still, if you like having some chaos in your strategy, Nathan Han might be your guy. And finally, let's talk about Choco BB. She's a bit more of a quirky supporter with her teleportation ability and solid damage boost for divine attacks. Her teleportation lets her get right in the action, which is a pretty cool way to throw off enemies. Plus, her damage amps up with space travel, making her stronger the more you use that ability. However, Choco BB has a bit of a range and speed problem, which means she might have trouble keeping up with faster or longer ranged enemies. Still, her teleportation and solid damage output can be a great asset when you need to catch enemies off guard. So, what do we have here? A mix of support and attack abilities that could definitely use a little fine tuning to truly shine in certain situations. While these characters might not be the stars of your team, with the right strategy, they can certainly bring a lot of fun and unique gameplay to the table. The key is knowing when to pull the trigger on their abilities and how to work with their weaknesses. If you want to get the most out of these C-tier abilities, you'll need to play carefully and strategically. They may not be the best in every situation, but understanding how to make them work will make all the difference. Keep experimenting, and you'll soon find yourself making some epic plays with these underdogs. The companions in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Light, Nightmare Drip Soup, and Sad Smile. Alright, let's talk about some solid B-tier defender companions in Haikyuu Legends. These guys aren't just about soaking up damage, they bring a lot more to the table, making sure your party's survival is locked down while dishing out some serious debuffs to enemies. So, if you're looking for some balanced support that isn't just about tanking hits, these companions have your back. First up, we've got Light. This companion is like a support player with some serious offensive chops. Not only does it boost your team's attack speed by 7 points, which is always nice, but the Mass Chain Holy Light ability cranks up divine damage by 30% per level. Oh, and let's not forget about that Luminous Vortex. It tracks your target and hits all enemies within range up to 24 times for a whopping 370% damage per hit. Every time you defeat an enemy, all enemies get stunned. Pretty neat, right? The catch though is that damage to you is amplified by 100%, so watch out for that. Next, we have Nightmare Drip Soup. A pretty wild name for a companion, huh? Well, this one's all about bringing the pain and locking enemies down. Its attack is boosted by 110%, and Sword of Nightmare increases damage by 8% per level. You drop the sword on enemies, dealing 307% damage, and here's the kicker. It restrains enemies every 2 seconds and adds extra restraint on every 5th attack. The debuff potential is real with this one, but be warned, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You'll need to time your attacks well to get the most out of it. Moving on, we have Sad Smile, a defender who's a bit of a glass cannon. This one boosts your accuracy stat by 30 points, and Curse increases void damage by 25% per level. But what really stands out here is the Curse itself. It also boosts your movement speed by 40% and damage by 50%. Plus, Sad Smile shoots 5 cursed fireballs that deal 425% damage. It's got great offensive potential, but its downside is that it also increases the damage it takes by 50%, and the HP isn't exactly the highest. So, it's great for dealing out damage, but you'll have to keep it safe. What makes these defenders special isn't just their ability to tank damage. They can also set your enemies up for a bad time by making them weaker or restraining them entirely. If you're in need of some solid support with a nice balance of offense and defense, these companions should definitely make their way into your roster. Just be mindful of their weaknesses. Light's vulnerability to damage and Sad Smile's low HP can really tip the scales if you're not careful. So there you have it. A breakdown of some B-tier defenders in Haikyuu Legends. They might not be the top tier powerhouses, but they can hold their own and then some. With the right strategy, these companions can really make a difference in your fights. The companions in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Witch, Tempest, Drip Soup, and Fengxian. Alright, let's dive into some of the standout abilities in Haikyuu Legends, shall we? If you've been playing, you know that choosing the right character isn't just about raw damage. It's about versatility, speed, and some sneaky support abilities that can turn the tide in battle. So let's talk about some A-tier characters who might not hit as hard as the big damage dealers, but they definitely know how to pack a punch in other ways. First up, we have Witch. Now, this character might not have the highest base attack, but trust me when I say she makes up for it in skill damage. She's got this cool ability where her skill damage is amplified by 400%. You heard that right, 400%. On top of that, her Divine Bomb can wreak havoc with an 80% increase in explosion damage per level. And let's not forget her Sphere of Light, which not only deals 250% damage, but explodes to dish out a crazy 1320% damage. And if you're clever and can stun enemies, you'll see that damage soar by another 100%. The cherry on top, her skill cooldown gets reduced every time you defeat an enemy. I mean, who doesn't love faster skills, right? The only downside is her base attack, so she's not the best for charging in head first. Then we've got Tempest, who's got penetration on lock, increasing it by 30 points. She's got this luminous outpour skill that boosts divine damage by 60% per level, and she creates this luminous fissure that heals 12% HP and deals a solid 740% damage to anyone unlucky enough to be in its range. On top of that, she's got this passive healing ability where you recover 1% HP every time an enemy takes damage. Her ultimate even hits all enemies every 8 seconds with 100% damage. Tempest is all about keeping the flow of battle in your favor, and while she might move around unpredictably at times, her ability to sustain and deal damage makes her a solid pick. The only thing holding her back is that she doesn't have the most HP for a charger, so you'll need to be careful. Now, let's talk about Drip Soup. Yes, you heard me right, Drip Soup. This character is all about dishing out big damage to bosses. His damage to boss monsters is boosted by a whopping 120%. Earthquake Smite also increases earth damage by 40% per level, and his earthquakes deal a huge 480% damage to all enemies in range while stunning them. The best part? If you manage to stun enemies, Drip Soup ramps up the damage by an additional 100%. Oh, and every 5th attack has a 100% chance to inflict critical damage. However, while he's got a lot going for him in terms of damage and crowd control, his HP and attack speed are a bit lacking for a charger, so he's a bit more suited for a strategic playstyle. Next we have Fengxian. This character specializes in dealing with normal monsters, boosting damage to them by 120%. He's all about flames, with Blaze increasing flame damage by a massive 95% per level. He can summon a pillar of fire that hits all enemies within range for a crazy 12% damage. On top of that, his basic attacks inflict bleed status on enemies, and all enemies caught in the fire are also inflicted with a burn status. Fengxian's offensive capabilities are top-notch, but like the others, his low HP makes him less ideal for charging in full throttle. So, while these A-tier characters may not hit as hard as the S-tier monsters, they certainly hold their own with impressive support abilities, status effects, and crowd control. If you're looking for a well-rounded character to fit into your team, these 4 definitely deserve your attention. Just make sure you play smart and position them properly on the battlefield, because they're not built to take hits like some of the beefier characters. And that's all for today's deep dive into A-tier characters in Haikyuu Legends. They may not be the flashiest, but they're definitely the ones you want on your team if you're looking for versatility and strategy. If you found this helpful, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tips and tricks. The companions in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, No Name, Heart Heater, Swordmaster, Zero, and Master Swordsman. Alright, let's dive into the absolute powerhouses of Haikyuu Legends, the attackers. These companions are the ones you want in your team if you're looking to crush your enemies with raw damage. You know, those monster bosses won't stand a chance when these guys are on the field. First up, we've got No Name. Sounds mysterious, right? But trust me, this companion lives up to the hype. He accelerates skills by 4 points, and his San Salvador slash can boost damage by 15% with each level. Plus, he's dealing 375% damage 5 times to up to 10 enemies in his range, and that's not even the best part. He can also lower the defense of his target by 10%, and if he hits a restrained enemy, the damage goes up by a whopping 70%. His movement speed buff for all allies by 6 points is just the cherry on his top. The only downside, his HP is a bit low, so he's not exactly the best for tanking hits up front. Next up, Heart Heater. This one's a bit of a mix between a monster attacker and a farming machine. If you need a solid attacker and want some extra gold in your pocket, Heart Heater is your guy. His Meteor Strike can increase flame damage by 110% with each level, and when he summons that meteor, it's an absolute game changer, dealing 1490% damage to all enemies in range. Oh, and did I mention it creates a lava field that burns enemies for 80% damage every 0.5 seconds. It's perfect for clearing out waves. However, don't expect him to be a speedy attacker. His attack speed is a bit slow, and you'll be stuck in place while casting Meteor Strike. Let's talk about Swordmaster. This guy's not just about brute force, he's all about those big numbers. His basic attack damage is boosted by 400%, which makes his hits really hurt. He also has Lacerate, which increases physical damage by 60% per level. His ability to deal 840% damage to 20 enemies 3 times is insane, and if the enemies are bleeding, that damage goes up by another 70%. He can also charge up a bleed effect attack every 5 seconds to hit all enemies within range for 206%. However, like the others, his HP isn't the highest, so keep him at a safe distance if you're planning to use him in a forward position. And then there's Zero. Oh boy, this one's a void-powered beast. His attacks get amplified by 400%, and his void outpour summons a void vortex, dealing 25% damage. He also has a pretty sick ability to inflict an infected effect on enemies surrounding the target every 6th attack. The trade-off? You can't move while casting his main ability, which means you're a sitting duck for a moment. Like others, Zero has a bit of a low HP, so be cautious about where you place him. But if you play your cards right, he can absolutely wreck the enemy team. Next, we've got Master Swordsman, who's got a serious talent for taking down normal monsters. This guy boosts his damage to 500% against those everyday baddies, and his core skill increases physical damage by 140% per level. When he strikes down a blade, it's an absolute devastation, dealing 2010% damage to enemies within range. Not only that, but he also inflicts a stasis effect, which can really mess up your opponent's plans. He's got that cool auto charge feature where he'll dash forward every 5 seconds to deal 200% damage to all enemies in his path. He's fast and furious, but just like everyone else here, be aware of his low HP for a forward attacker. So when you're putting together your team, don't sleep on these attackers. They're a must-have for any boss fight or tough battles where raw damage is the name of the game. Sure, they've got some weaknesses, low HP, a bit slow on the casting, but their offensive capabilities are absolutely unmatched. If you want to make sure you're always dealing the most damage possible, these guys should definitely be in your roster. Happy hunting, and may the No Name Mystery and Swordmaster's blades lead you to victory. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.